My elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Just to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me, my name is Alicia. I'm an anaesthetic doctor at University Hospital Southampton, and I am also part of the Mahdi Health Committee. I'm sure that this time last year, none of us foresaw the events of 2020 and the current lockdown period, and we are all missing the normality of times before COVID-19. Our emotional and mental health has suffered tremendously as a result of this global pandemic. We wanted to organise a platform where you could have your questions answered, as well as receive advice and information about how to improve your mind. Please do feel free to send in your questions to the speakers via the comments function throughout the programme. We will have a question and answer session at the end. We will start with a recitation from the Holy Quran. Please welcome Abbas Huda with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Thank you, Alicia. I'm just going to recite a few verses of an extract of a surah from the Quran. It's Surah Bani Israel, and I'm going to recite verses 76 to 80. And verse 80, for those of you who don't know, can be used as a short dua whenever you have any struggles or any problems. It's a one-line dua. So let me just begin with verse 76 to 80, and I will cover the translation as well. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإن كادوا ليستفزونك من الأرض ليخرجوك منها وإذا لا يلبثون خلافك إلا قليلا سنة من قد أرسلنا قبلك من رسلنا ولا تجد لسنتنا تحويلا أقم الصلاة لدلوك الشمس إلى غسق الليل وقرآن الفجر إن قرآن الفجر كان مشهودا ومن الليل فتهجد به نافلة لك عسى أن يبعثك ربك مقاما محمودا وقل ربي أدخلني مدخل صدق وأخرجني مخرج صدق واجعل لي من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا صدق الله العلي العظيم. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. And they were likely to harass you in the land, so that they could expel you from there, and in that case they would not have lived there after you but a little. Such has been our way with the messengers we sent before you, and you will find no reversal in our way. Establish salah between the decline of the sun and the darkness of the night, and the recital at dawn. Surely the recital at dawn is well attended. And during the night wake up for salah and additional prayer for you. It is very likely that your Lord places you at a praised station. And say, this is the dua verse, O my Lord, make me enter a rightful entrance and make me exit a rightful exit, and grant me from your own a power favored by you. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim.
Thank you so much for that beautiful recitation, which I am sure that we can all appreciate even more so in these times of difficulty. I would now like to invite our youth speaker, Soraiya Manji, to give a short talk about the value of mental health. Thank you, Soraiya.
My dear elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Soraiya, and I am 13 years old. I have an interest in understanding about good mental health, and therefore I was delighted to be given the opportunity to talk to you today. Earlier this academic year, I took part in a workshop at school about keeping safe, and we discussed numerous points relating to mental well-being, which was extremely informative and gave me much inspiration for my talk today. In this short exchange, I would like to discuss some of the mental well-being challenges my family and I have faced recently, and to give my perspective and some ideas for practical suggestions on ways in which we have tried to maintain good mental health during the lockdown. One of the main challenges I've faced in the lockdown is to do with screen time. Currently, I find myself relying quite heavily on devices. I have daily online school lessons, weekly online art tuition, madrasa every Saturday over Zoom, on top of texting my friends and trying to keep in touch with my family over FaceTime. It's incredible in this era how we have all these means of accessing technology, but with every cause comes an effect. What can all this extra screen time do to our well-being? It often can make me and my family feel tired, drained, and prone to headaches and migraines. It's also a well-known fact that being exposed to a screen in the hour before bedtime can give rise to sleep disruption due to the stimulation created by the light from the screen. To try and address these issues, it's clearly the case that I'm unable to reduce the online hours I'm at school, but as a family, we've tried to make sure that we take a fresh air break and a 20-minute walk each day straight after school to clear our heads. I feel genuinely so much better afterwards. And during the school day, I make sure that I move away from my computer in between classes to give my eyes a rest. I have a safe space that I can go to in the garden on the swing in the corner, where I can escape to be by myself if I need to. And I think my school has also realized the importance of having time out, as tomorrow we have a very welcome no screens day. So instead of our usual online learning, we're to engage in a variety of other activities, such as listening to a podcast, baking a cake, writing a letter and posting it, or doing some mindful colouring, and then to share what we've done with our tutor. I love to read before bed, but to address the issue of possible sleep disruption from the light associated with using a device, I always make sure that my mobile is downstairs, that my Kindle is switched off by 9 p.m, and that I'm only reading traditional books until it's time to sleep. The second challenge I faced in lockdown, and my biggest personal struggle, is the lack of hugs and physical contact with my wider family and friends. I'm a very affectionate person, and hugs from my loved ones is something that I can't get enough of. If you feel the same, a recent article I read referred to this as touch hunger and associated a lack of touch with greater levels of anxiety, because humans need other people, and even though I'm isolating with my family, I still feel surprisingly lonely and crave the company of the people I don't have around me. I think the issue with touch hunger is a little harder to address. With this lockdown, I simply can't actually see my friends or non-bubble family, and even if I did, I need to maintain social distancing. Though it pains me to say this, I think it is unlikely that this will change for at least a few more months. Instead, I make sure I call out to my friends and family on FaceTime and find reasons to celebrate on Zoom to keep in touch with the people who matter to me. In case you're interested to know, the same article that introduced me to this concept of touch hunger offered a number of other possible ways to address this feeling, such as through the usage of a weighted blanket or through interaction with animals. For instance, it recommended that stroking a cat can activate the systems that are engaged when you are touched yourself and therefore help to reduce anxiety. The third challenge I faced in lockdown has been that of disruption to my routine. However, I have needed to adapt because routines are an incredibly important part of my life. Even simple ones can be my anchor to maintaining a balance. Having a routine gives me a structure that I can work to and a list of things that I should expect from myself. This way, I don't ask for too much from myself, and I also then have a sense of accomplishment when I achieve all that I expect to by following my structured routine. Having looked into why this helps me, a study from Oxford University found that routines create a level of mental health where feelings such as depression, isolation, fear, and uncertainty are significantly less prevalent than in individuals without a structured routine in their life. A routine is essentially a part of my self-care, providing me with stability and helping me to reduce my anxiety, which for me is often connected to uncertainty. In fact, many of the ways in which my family and I have looked after our mental health during lockdown have come down to simple acts of self-care: eating properly and regularly, staying hydrated, sleeping well, and getting fresh air and exercise. I've also tried meditation, breathing techniques, and sleep stories using apps such as Calm and Headspace, journaling my thoughts and reasons to be grateful, and trying to live in the moment. I have found that it is these small, common sense steps that have formed a foundation for good habits that I can build to shake off any extra stress or tension I may feel. It's by looking after our mental health that we create mental wealth. We become more resilient and kinder to ourselves, become better equipped to support those around us, and inshallah become happier, more fulfilled individuals. It goes without saying that my faith has provided me and my family with great mental strength over the last year, and in dealing with the challenges I have outlined briefly today. But I hope that some of the strategies and tips discussed in this forum may be helpful if you are also struggling with similar challenges or know someone else who might be. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my talk today. Salawat.
Soraiya, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy homeschooling schedule to write and deliver that talk. You've given us some fantastic tips and some food for thought about very small things that we can do to improve our emotional well-being. And if that's less screen time, I do hope it's after this event. Our next speaker is Zainali Panjwani, an osteopath and lifestyle medicine enthusiast. He completed his training at the British College of Osteopathic Medicine with further studies from the Gray Institute, specializing in functional movement and biomechanics. He has been using these approaches to treat a variety of conditions, including lower back and leg pain. His lifestyle medicine background follows studies in naturopathy and functional medicine, which has allowed him to dive deep into the connections between the various biological systems of the human body. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us today.
No, thank you so much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum to everyone, my dear elders, my brothers, my sisters, everyone who's watching from everywhere. I mean, I'm based in Birmingham at the moment, but I'm sure there's people all over the country sometimes. When we put programs out, it's amazing how we can connect with so many people. And I want to start off actually by congratulating Sister Soraiya there with that absolutely phenomenal talk. I think that she touched upon some very important topics and very important practical tips that I think we all can take lessons from. So I definitely take lessons from that. Screen time for sure, but also that bedtime routine. I love the idea of a heavy weighted blanket as a hugging mechanism. That's beautiful. So thank you so much for that talk. I guess my little snippet here, inshallah, which I would like to cover in the linking it to mental health, is around exercise and movement. I'm going to break this down into simple steps that we can essentially take. At the end of the day, the most important thing we can do is to provide some practical tips that tomorrow we can all use and we can all benefit from. But there has to be a little bit of motivation as to why I should be moving and why I should be keeping fit and healthy. And the first thing is to look at the difference between exercise and movement. And there is a difference. A lot of the time when we talk about exercise, we relate it to a particular sport, or we relate it to a game that we play, or the gym, or a particular position like press-ups or pull-ups or squats or lunges. But when we look at movement, movement is something that we do as human beings on a day-to-day basis, whether we like it or not. We have to move. We have to move around. We have to get from one place to another. We have to reach for an object underneath our table or chair. We have to move all the time. And movement is part and parcel of who we are. But a lot of the time, exercise and movement are always looked at as a means of improving our physical health, our looks and our physical musculature. But we tend not to look at it from a point of view of improving our mental health and improving other areas, such as improving our sleep as well. How can exercise help us sleep better? How can exercise or movement help us in our mental health, in our mood, in our focus, in our attention, in our energy? I'm throwing some buzzwords here so that we can connect to them. Focus, energy. These are things that we seem to be suffering from in our global pandemic in this time, but also just global pandemic in energy deficiency and in our mood as well. So what I'd like to do is to first tap into some motivation before we go into some practical tips. And the motivation is around how movement can improve your mindset, your mood, your focus, your mental health. So we're going to touch upon a couple of quick studies which are so interesting. The first one is a randomized control trial. Now, any medics out there, scientists out there will tell you this is the gold standard of studies, randomized control trials. And this one in particular was done over 12 months, over the year, looking at cognitive behavioral therapy, which is CBT, and exercise. So two methods of basically looking at which one of these is going to be helping our mental health the best. And is there one or the other? And what they found is that CBT and exercise equally helped with mental health conditions, equally. That doesn't mean we push one aside for the other, definitely not. We need to use them both for good reasons. But what it does show is that exercise has this capacity of improving our mental health, and something that's in our control. Sister Soraiya talked about walking out for some fresh air after school. That minimal motion is enough to stimulate certain chemical reactions in our brain that help us function better. And that moves me on actually to how much and what type of effect does a little bit of movement, like 5 minutes of fresh air, do to our mind or to our body. This is a really fascinating one. There's a Japanese study that looked at someone just doing a very slow cycling motion, literally sitting on a chair, just doing a very gentle cycle. And they found that it enhances the hippocampus in the brain. And for us who don't know what the hippocampus is, it's shown to have good impact on learning and memory, as well as some mental health conditions. And that was just pedaling slowly whilst in a seated position. There is a lot of science behind how it's happening. We don't want to touch base there. What we want to show is that these things are phenomenal. And the last one I'm going to share with you is I guess they call it a protein in the brain. It's called BDNF. And this particular protein in the brain is created free of charge when we move, when we exercise. It doesn't cost anything. It's free of charge, and it's created inside of our brain. And we know this particular BDNF helps with something called neuroplasticity, which helps us to grow new nerve fibers in our brain. So imagine, just by moving, you can not only have pretty much potentially equal standard to a therapy of some kind, we do a little bit of movement and we improve our hippocampus in our brain. And if we are moving regularly, we create BDNF in our brain that helps with these new nerve fibers and neurotransmitter production in our brain. This is incredible. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has really created a fascinating system where things like movement can have such impact on our day-to-day life. Now, one question I get asked a lot, being an osteopath, looking at lots of musculoskeletal conditions like back pain, shoulder pain, knee pain, etc., is that exercise can be challenging, especially if you have pain. That's the one thing that challenges people. The other thing is about weather. So going outside is tough. If it's cold, it's snowing, it's not good temperature, it's raining heavily, I might slip, I might fall, all good reasons. So we've got pain, we've got weather, and we've also got equipment. And equipment is a big one. It's all about having the trainers, or having the weights at home, or having the gym attire, the clothing, the things that you can put on to make you feel like you're going to exercise. All of those are very good, and they do help with creating a habit of exercise or movement, but they're not necessary. We can create simple movements, and we call them 5-minute wins, 5-minute windows of quick movements that we can do throughout the day. So here we come into some of those practical tips. Where can we move and how can we move? If we think about 5-minute wins, we could create a habit of movement before we brush our teeth. Brushing our teeth is a habit that we do every morning. And if we can attach a new habit that we want to create on a habit that we already have, it will become a routine. Like Sister Soraiya said after school, the 20-minute walk, it's a habit. It's become a habit because of routine. So we can create 5-minute wins. And the exercise or movements that we can do don't have to be specifically gym type exercises. What about simply putting our hands above our head? How many of us are on the screens, on our phones, on our laptops, but we hardly just put our hands above our head and reach up towards the ceiling? We could do 10 or 5 minutes of reaching above our head. If you want to make it a little bit more fun, try to add some rotational motions. If you want to add some weight, throw in some water bottles in your hand. And if you have some gym equipment like a dumbbell, you can add a dumbbell. There's so many things that we can do. Let's move on through the day. Let's meet Dhuhr namaz, Dhuhr and Asr. We get to Dhuhr and Asr Salah, and in between the prayer, we can do a couple of quick squats, up and down. Or even if you don't want to do the squat, what about just sitting to standing a couple of times? If you can't go all the way down to the floor because you've got knee pain or discomfort, try a chair, sitting up and down off a chair. The little bit of movement that we do is going to improve our overall well-being. And we're talking about mental health. When it comes to pain and discomfort, this is another one. You can pick and choose pain-free movements that are equivalent to movement and exercise. So a lot of people talk to me about, I can't go for a walk because I have really bad knee pain. But alhamdulillah, we have our arms and we have our shoulders and we have our hands. So can we move our hands around? And if you want to get the heart rate going, can we move them a little bit faster? That will get you going. Can you move them in different directions? So push them out forwards, push them out above your head, switch into rotations. The more that you can move your body, the more likely you're going to get all the benefits that we talked about from some of those research articles that I shared with you. Now, as we move on, those are simple quick wins, 5-minute wins. If anyone wants to know a little bit more information, maybe is interested in some podcasts and things around mental health with movement specifically, there are some quick ones which I can share with you, and maybe we can post them out to Wessex Jamaat, for example, in the YouTube links or something like that. So one of them is by someone called Brendan Stubbs. He has a podcast with Dr. Chatterjee, actually, which you can find online. So you can just type these two names in and you will find them. And that's a very interesting podcast about how seeing some of the science behind how it can help, but also some fantastic practical tips that you can get hold of to help you improve your movement. So that's one area which you can look at. If you're looking at some quick wins, some quick solutions to quick exercises, there are lots of people out there that are doing some of those. You just have to type them in YouTube and you will come up with so many fantastic exercises. Lots of people have focused themselves on Joe Wicks. Of course, if you can do his exercises, please do. But if you go on YouTube, there is a plethora of different movements that you can play around with. Have fun with your children, with your kids. Have fun with your parents and your grandparents and teach them some different movements and get them moving throughout the day. This can actually, on a side note, improve our mental health even more because we're also increasing laughter and increasing that love and connection that we lack in today's society. Inshallah, if we can really grow in that area, it'll be fantastic. So these are two areas you can look at, some podcasts and also some video material that you can look for. Of course, I will be open for any questions and answers at the end if you have any queries, but I was hoping to put forward in this particular talk some quick snippet ideas, some 5-minute wins, and to show you that just simply getting some movement throughout our day can improve so many things in our body. And I haven't even touched upon things like dopamine and serotonin and all the other hormones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in our body. So I hope, inshallah, this was useful for you, and I'm happy, inshallah, to take some questions at the end once we've covered all the talks.
Thank you so much for giving us that insight into the link between exercise and mental health. Hopefully this will inspire us all to incorporate some form of movement in our daily routines. Our final speaker is Dr. Haider AlHakim, who works as an ophthalmic surgeon in the NHS. He is also an international speaker and burnout coach, working with doctors and other professionals at risk of negative outcomes due to extreme stress, using a psychoanalytical process. He is the author of the semi-autobiographical self-help book, Physician on Fire, and hosts the Surgical Spirit podcast. And I'm looking forward to hearing his thoughts on topics that have been offered by the community already. So we'll start with our first topic, if we may. What should we do, Dr. AlHakim, if we have concerns about the mental health of a family member or a friend? Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum, Sister and Dr. Alicia.
Alaikum salam.
I didn't realize you were a doctor. You kept that quiet. So if we're concerned about a family member that may be having some mental health difficulty, we pick that up quickly. So it's not something that's hidden. We can't actually hide our difficult emotions from our loved ones. And the important concept that I want to impress on people is that having difficult emotions or negative emotions is actually not a bad thing. It's a normal thing. And, you know, I'm trying to normalize this conversation and to say it's understandable for people to sometimes go through difficulty. So that's the first thing, is that you normalize it and you make it an understandable situation or an understandable reaction to difficulties, because life is full of difficulties. You know, let's not gloss over this. You know, we all go through difficulties and we all go through times of extreme suffering. And then we're bombarded with difficult ideas and behaviors and emotions and thoughts and all of the metaphysical, psychological aspects that go inside. If you're able to normalize that and try and understand it and accept it, it actually goes a long way with solving a lot of these issues. So, you know, my answer would be is actually to sit down and listen carefully and work with it. I think it makes a big difference in alleviating the problems. You know, as you know, listening is the most powerful therapeutic modality. You know, just sitting there and listening to the problems or listening to the difficulties. You know, being a doctor yourself, you know, in anesthetics, you know, it's a surgical profession, but yet you have to sit there and really listen to the patient. And the moment you do that, you know, you get a good idea of what's going wrong. So let's go away from this kind of notion that, you know, mental illness needs to be corrected instantly, quickly, you know, with a pill or with a technique or with, you know, something like that. It's actually something that needs to be normalized, and also you need to think about long term as well, rather than short term solutions.
I completely agree with that. And in the same way that sometimes when you have physical ailments, so for example, you bump your knee, you don't automatically turn to kind of a healthcare professional. You try and address it yourself within your kind of close family or with a friend, for example. So in the same,
you don't go straight to the tablets as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, you rest, you put a bit of ice there, yeah. You know, you reduce your exercise, you sort of talk about it, you whinge, you complain, you know, make a scene, and it's all acceptable.
Definitely. And then kind of on a more, if you're worried about it over a longer period of time and you feel like, you know, the family member or friend isn't addressing it, or if you feel like
yeah,
they're in danger?
you know, if you can't cope with it, then I think it's really important to go to a practitioner who has an alternative viewpoint rather than a traditional medical viewpoint, because the traditional medical viewpoint, and you know, I'm within the system, you know, it's geared up to start you on medication. And with psychotropic drugs, so drugs that affect the brain or the chemicals of the brain, you know, it does mess things up. And if you're on medication which affects your brain neurochemistry, they do get addicted to it. And then you've got this issue about how do you wean them off? I mean, it's not a very, you know, the current medical model is that you go for CBT and medication because the, you know, the gold standard medical literature says so. But in terms of mental health, you know, there is this movement that we should go away from diagnosis of mental health, because there isn't a diagnosis. It's more of a shorthand description of the symptoms that you have. So it's not actually depression that you have. You have symptoms of low mood or lack of sleep or lack of energy. So these are all symptoms of a condition which we kind of call depression. The drug that you take doesn't treat the depression, it treats the symptoms, okay, which is two different things. Now, you know, this is not sort of typical of what the Royal College of Psychiatry talk about, but there is definitely a movement of psychiatrists and psychotherapists and psychoanalysts who are going away from, you know, the whole diagnostic hierarchy and structure. And I think, you know, the system's not sustainable, really, unless you want to put them into the structure and the whole industrial complex of medicine. And I guess being in medicine for the last 21 years, you know, I see that there is a kind of going towards short-term solutions through medication and then staying there, causing chronic need for this medication. So, you know, there are a group of psychotherapists and psychiatrists who have an alternative view in treating this as something that's normalized. Obviously, medication helps in the short term. So if you have very severe pain, you do need the ibuprofen. Okay. But you also need the other supportive treatments for it at the same time. That means you've got to do some work. So if you have a problem with your knee, you take a bit of medication in the first few days, and then you've got to do some physio and some exercise afterwards. So going back to mental health, medication helps to a certain extent, but then you need to work with yourself. You need to work through the emotions, through the thoughts, through the behaviors, through the stories that are getting you there in the first place. Work through the traumas, and you know, most traumas tend to happen in childhood. Work through those childhood traumas that cause those difficult behaviors and emotions and reactions, to find an answer as to why you're going to those dark places. So the medication doesn't have agency. You have agency. And that's an important distinction to make. You know, that you have the agency for change within you, rather than the medication or the therapist or the behavioral therapy. So there's a shift from putting responsibility on the healthcare professional and taking that responsibility on yourself to change. Now, obviously, you know, certain situations are very, very dire, and you know, you can harm yourself or other people, but then there are laws in place for you to sort of come through that, but then that's when the real work starts. You know, it's not rosy, you know, it's not a rosy picture, I hope.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, no, it's more of a holistic approach, using various tools rather than saying this is what's wrong with me and this is how I need to.
There is a hierarchy of effectivity, and the greatest effective tool is the spiritual tool, which we all know about theoretically, but it needs real life, realistic practice. So that comes first. And the biggest way of connecting to spirituality is coming out of yourself and into the community. That's the best way of getting on with yourself, moving forward. So that's the best way of making yourself better, is the spiritual side. Then you've got the psychological side, which involves dealing with your thoughts and behaviors and emotions and the narratives that you have within you that's causing you to be not so productive. But then we need to go away from this narrative that the only way you're a successful human being or a successful person is by being productive. Some people are not productive. Some people are just, unproductive. It doesn't mean that they're not a human being.
Yeah.
This is the way they are, and we need to go away from that. But obviously, in a certain society, West and East, you're only considered a success if you're productive. But there are times in our lives when we're not productive, and we have to slow down and we have to switch off, and that's part and parcel of living on this planet. So, spiritual therapy is the most effective way, then psychological therapy, then physical therapy. I think that's kind of a hierarchy of effective mental health.
Okay. I'm going to follow on with a question that someone has just posed, if that's okay. So for those suffering with, I'm just going to pop it up on the screen as well. For those suffering with anxiety, do you think it's best to confront the anxiety itself, or to just avoid any possible or known triggers for the anxiety?
I would say both. Okay, so there are certain things that is within your power. That you can confront, and you need to confront them, because that's the only way to reduce your anxieties. Okay, and it's within your control. I want you to stay in your comfort zone. I don't want you to come out of your comfort zone. And by confronting your anxiety, you increase your comfort zone. Okay. Rather than going into that anxiety status and then it just gets worse. So it's confronting the anxieties which you can, and at the same time avoiding the triggers that makes your anxiety worse. And they tend to be quite stable things. So these triggers could be something that's a person or a specific situation or a specific word or a specific image. So once you get your confidence up by confronting the anxieties, you need to start. I mean, what I tell clients is, if I was to say, I'm going to give you this tablet, it's a magic tablet, and everything's going to change for you for the better, what is the first thing you're going to do tomorrow? And they tend to tell you, well, actually, I'll do this.
Yeah. Because
it's consciously there in their mind. And they can do it. They know they can do it, but they just need that bit of a push. And as Sister Soraiya said eloquently, it's these habits, but most important is these small habits. It's always little, what we call micro habits that you can do that literally takes a second, or 10 seconds, or maximum a minute. If you're able to work at that every day, but look. It takes daily work.
Yeah.
It's not something that you do once and then you think, yeah, I'm going to live happily ever after. This is a notion that's perpetuated within society and within media and within stories that are popularized around the world, is that there's this happy ever ending, and that's not the case in marriage as well. There's this sort of daily work every day. And when you're parenting, it's the same thing. And then when you're getting older like me, it's the same thing. And when you're retired, it's the same thing. And when so you're always challenged with these difficult situations. And you need to get into the habit of expanding your, conscious comfort zone, and at the same time avoiding the triggers that you know, until those triggers don't become triggers anymore. But that comes from increased confidence rather than, keep putting yourself in difficult situations, because you'll just contract and then you'll go back to where you were before, and maybe even worse, because something that you were happy with becomes, oh, that's even difficult now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, so it's kind of getting that balance, isn't it?
Yeah, so wins is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Keep winning, and then once you keep winning, you start doing the difficult stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a good public speaker, and I don't actually like speaking, and I shy away from doing talks because, for me that was a great source of anxiety. But I knew, okay, what am I good at? I'm good at answering questions, and I'm good at having conversations, and through that I can turn into something that's difficult for me, which is being in front of so many people, listening and asking questions.
And that's what you do through your podcasts and things, don't you?
Yeah, so I mean, the podcast, I mean, for me, when I went through my stress and anxiety, and at some stage, I went through bouts of suicide, the thing that got me out of my funk was actually listening to other conversations. And podcast was the thing that got me interested in other people. And then I started one myself. But, I started with something small, and then I gradually got my confidence up. And then I did the things that I thought I was fearful about. Obviously, I was fearful at the start, but then, as Sister Soraiya, eloquently said, it's you get into that habit of just pushing yourself just that little bit. Instead of 10 steps, you do 11 steps, and then the next day you do 12, and so on.
Yeah. Thank you. So I've got another question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So many people feel that seeking help shows that they're not strong enough to deal with the mental health issues themselves. Can you talk a bit more about this?
Well, human beings are dependent on other human beings. And if you go back to when we were children, we were very dependent on other human beings. And the greatest learning process is when you ask for help, which is why children do learn so much more quickly than adults, because as we become older, we think we know it, but we don't. So the secret is actually to unlearn what you've learned and sort of be a child again, and ask for help. So knowing that children actually learn very quickly and adapt very quickly and are extremely resilient. So, it tells us that maybe if we accept that we have a problem and we can ask for help, maybe that's the start of our alleviation of our negative symptoms. But, we all go through difficulty. Some of us get broken legs, some of us get swollen knees, some of us get heart attacks, some of us get, blood in the brain. We're not gonna, these things happen, we're human beings, things break down, and we get difficult emotions. We get difficult emotions, we get difficult behaviors, we get difficult thoughts, and it's absolutely normal.
Absolutely. And kind of following on from that, in terms of the more serious kind of conditions, I would say, how can we reconcile the feelings of blame and guilt associated with behaviors that cause harm to ourselves, such as self-harm and suicide? And I think that's particularly in a religious or kind of cultural aspect.
We need to have a serious dialogue. We had one of our well-known sheikhs in Canada, whose son killed himself, died through suicide. And we need to be frank. There's been lots of deaths in our community through suicide, and it's a normal human condition. Suicides have been going on forever and ever, and they'll continue to go on. So there's nothing to be ashamed about that. And I think there needs to be, we agreed with the chef that there needs to be a dialogue amongst the jurists, about this issue, and to look at the scriptures and see exactly, you know, where the shame and all these negative connotations come from, because it doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't serve anyone. I mean, my experience of going through suicide, it's a very dark time, you know, and it's a dark time for everyone. So the ulama need to have a serious conversation about this and find a solution, because there are lots of people in pain at the moment, and their families in pain as well. And the last thing they want is further judgment and further pain. Okay, the sheikh is hurting right now, and luckily his community in Canada are very supportive. He's had other people, other senior individuals in the community who have been giving him, you know, the usual vitriol. And I think that needs to change. And it needs to be much more accepting, much more welcoming, much more understanding of the human condition. It is a human condition. And, you know, it's okay when it's the sheikh's son, but what if it's your son? How would you like the community to react when it's your son or your daughter that kills himself? Okay. How are you going to reconcile that issue? So it's something for the ulama to discuss. Us as clinicians and as therapists, you know, it's straightforward. You know, we deal with it because it's our, you know, professional ethos, and it's our professional responsibility. So, you know, this is a question to be asked to the ulama, and I'm more than happy to moderate that discussion and question them in their interpretation of the jurisprudence. But, you know, shame is a very powerful negative emotion, and it causes all kinds of damage, all kinds of psychological damage. And I think, you know, if you're in this game of creating shame, you are creating trauma. You're creating the potential for all kinds of mental illness for that child, or for that youngster, or for that follower, or for that student, or whoever's under your care. And it's a very, very damaging emotion, and very, very damaging negative power transfer, which you need to stay well away from. I mean, you know, you went to medical school. You know, just imagine, I mean, I'm sure you had one teacher who used that kind of negative power transfer, and I'm sure you hated that particular subspecialty. And you think to yourself, I'm avoiding that subspecialty. And people avoid the community because of that, or people avoid the faith because of that. People avoid the ideology because of that. So you need to be very careful what kind of negative energy transfer you're using.
I think absolutely, and it's amazing how tiny words can have such a huge impact, whether they're, you know, a few positive words or a few negative words, and you never know what impact the words that you say have on someone over,
but look,
you know,
we're human beings, us as parents and teachers, and people, you know, we make mistakes.
Yeah.
There is trauma there, and, you know, they go through a lot of mental health. Then they go and see a therapist. Then they understand that actually it's a normal human condition. So, Allahu A'lam, I don't know why we have to go through this journey. It's a painful journey, but we all have to go through it. So it's a way of like a baptism of fire, really. You know, we have to earn our grey hairs and lines and all that kind of stuff. Allahu A'lam, I don't know.
Yeah, just following on from that, I think there's someone's just asked how we can kind of address or remove the stigma that society has about negative states of mental health, and you've kind of addressed that partly in what you've just talked about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a normal human condition. You know, it's part and parcel of living on this planet. You know, this is what we have to go through. And I think it's important to go through the sadness to realize the happiness. It's important to go through disease to realize the health. It's important to go through the loss to know what you have. So these are all you need to go through death in order to realize what life is about. And you need to go through mental illness to realize what good mental health is about. And I think that's, you know, if we don't have the negative, we won't have the positive. You know, it's It's as simple as that. And you know, for us to overcome the stigma, talking about it won't make things worse. But you know, I think there is a kind of narrative that they want to say everything's getting worse and everything, you know, everyone's going to have mental health issues. And I think you need to take that with a pinch of salt. And you know, it is a bit of rabble rousing and scaremongering. And I don't know, you know, are there pharmaceutical companies that own a bit of BBC and Sky and you know, or probably you know, they want you all on antidepressants and antipsychotics and so on. I don't know.
Okay, we're just going to add Brother Zainali back into the discussion, and then kind of open up the questions as well. I just wanted to ask you both about your kind of viewpoints and your kind of knowledge base on the link between mental and physical health, particularly in regards to pain, because I think that's something that's really important to address.
Yeah, I mean, let me start. I mean, you know, if I've got pain, I go to the gym, I do some exercise, you know, I create more pain. And then it kind of gets better. I guess it's release of all those free chemicals, you know, the good stuff that's in the body. And, you know, we love free stuff. You know, if it's free, it works for us.
Yes, we do love free stuff. Now, there's, I guess my only answer to this is the fact that first we acknowledge the fact that there is a connection between the fact that our mental well-being and our state of mind, I would say, has an impact on pain and discomfort. Obviously, there are some theories of how that all works, but yes, there is a big influence of your mindset regarding pain and discomfort. And I see a lot of people who suffer from things like chronic back pain that hasn't had necessarily a major incident. But if they've had trauma in the past, or if there's something related, I remember reading this once, this phrase of "I'm carrying a load on my shoulders," and they have shoulder pain. And they mention this word, "I'm carrying a load on my shoulders," and they're complaining of their shoulder pain. Which, when I examine it, it doesn't necessarily have a physical component to it. It looks well, moves well, it feels well, but obviously there seems to be something that in the past or something they're dealing with, which maybe they don't share with me necessarily because they're coming to see me from a physical pain perspective. But there is definitely something we need to look at from that standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, on a different note, if you look at the training of the Marines, for example, you know, they go through some rigorous physical exercise, and they're all in big pain, and yet they work through it because they have an ethos, they have a philosophy, you know, they have a purpose, they have a community. So, you know, these are all abstract ideas which are pseudo spiritual and psychological. Once you get into that realm of dealing with the pain subsides. Biologically speaking, you do release a lot of chemicals when you start thinking about purpose and meaning in your life. You know, you do release all of that free stuff, you know, all that neurotropic chemicals rather than using the psychotropic chemicals. So it's an interesting, you know, this has been shown that, you know, if you do think about purpose, if you do think about your meaning in life, you can overcome actually some pretty serious pain and some pretty serious physical disabilities. So, you know, it is a mind game. In our case, it is a spiritual game. And if you're able to tap into that spiritual upliftment, it will improve your physical pain for sure.
Thank you. The question to both of you, how do you think we can address and, more importantly, improve the mental health of the youth within our community?
Yeah, very important question. I think if I can kick off with this one, in terms of what I feel is that the best thing we can do has to be creating a tribe or a community around one another, whether that be at the moment through virtual means or whether that be eventually through physical means, being amongst each other. And the more we create a tribe, the more we create a community, the more likely we're going to create good habit changes and have an environment where we can move forward with that. Obviously, if my advice, being a young person myself, but also for those who are younger than me as well, it's always looking for that right tribe. What I've realized is, I know we just spoke to Muhammad Abbas as well just recently, and I was blessed to have that friendship in my university days, that tribe amongst me that essentially motivated me to learn, to develop, to understand, and also to talk to one another. And I remember having those very challenging conversations at some points, during university life, but those people were there to create that tribe with me. That goes down to what my topic was today about movement. That comes to that point as well, about creating a tribe that helps you to move as well. So I don't know if if anyone's been for those park runs that we used to have on Saturday mornings, just turning up there with 300 people at the park just automatically engages the energy, and you work off each other's skills, you work off each other's friendship, and you manage to move at the same time. So I think it's the most important thing for our youngsters and myself included is creating the right tribe that motivates you every day. It doesn't have the negative drain that we keep hearing a lot of all the time. That's my view on that question.
I think an important, and I agree with you there, Zainali, and I think an important concept is acceptance. Once we bring acceptance into the equation on both sides, we notice that mental illness subsides and it gets better, and people are more comfortable to be themselves. One of the reasons why we do get mental illness is because we feel uncomfortable with ourselves. It's us, and yet we feel uncomfortable about it. And yet it's natural for us. So once we accept other people, they're more likely to accept themselves. And then once they accept themselves, they'll feel better in dealing with their mental difficulties.
There's another question that's just come in for Dr. AlHakim. There is a claim that those who are religious and spiritual should not suffer from mental health. Do you know if there's any basis of this from any studies?
Well, I can't really swear on. Yeah, no, that's I think that's folklore, and I think that's sort of a myth that needs to be debunked. And for the people to debunk this is our ulama. They need to come on and explicitly debunk these issues that, I've got mental illness because I've got issues with my religion or my spirituality or my iman, or, I'm weak. It shouldn't be coming from me. We need to get a few of the ulama over here and, give them a good talking to.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree in the sense that, you can be religious and spiritual, but you can also suffer from a mental illness just as you can suffer from a physical ailment. So
yeah,
I think
it's important. There's this concept of tragedy and evil, and I think we need to put this into the context that this is a tragedy. This is something that is outside our realm of choice and volition. And the reason why that is because we get a lot of childhood trauma, which is out of our control and our volition, and that's the commonest cause for mental illness. So yeah, let's have this serious dialogue, and because people are suffering with this. People are suffering with this. Yeah. I suffered with it, and the moment I kind of change my narrative and change my internal dialogue, I was able to move on.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hidden illness that would be opened up a lot more if people felt more comfortable, not feeling guilty or kind of shamed.
Yeah, I mean, we can start it slowly. It doesn't have to go straight away into, public stratosphere and up on the mumbar and sort of everything. Otherwise, I don't want to say it wants to get worse, because I don't want to drive that narrative. I don't want to say it's going to get worse, because I don't know what the future is going to hold. But there's a potential for it to getting worse, and I don't want to contribute to that potential.
Yeah. Moving on to questions about exercises. So I think, Dr. Zainali, these are directed to you. The first question, what type of exercises are good for mental health and release the right neurotransmitters? So suggestive of strength training, cardio, or a mix of everything?
The last one, the mix of everything. Our body requires everything. A little bit of strength, a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of heart pumping, cardiovascular health. Mixing it up in variety is important. And this is why in my little talk, I was talking about the difference between exercise and movement. We have this concept of exercise being a particular type. And yes, there are some studies on particular types of exercise and how they benefit in different ways. But ultimately, if you're looking at, and I always go back to movement as back in caveman days, when we were cavemen and we were running after and hunting our food, I mean, they wouldn't just take a normal stroll or a regular run for that matter, because they've got to conserve energy, because their movement was duck under a tree, jump from one place to another, move in different directions to get their food every day. So if you think about that concept, all of those exercises in a variety of different ways can really improve that. And I've been kind of reading some down the questions that might be able to clarify one question that's asked about the different forms of exercise. What can you do, rather? And typically, what I said about these 5-minute wins, if you think strength is about load, so anytime you fix yourself in a position, or you have a little bit of weight, or you're going faster, that also is load as well. So different type of load. That can be a form of strength. So that's one idea, a concept you can play around with. If you think about cardiovascular, of course, the longer you go for, the more your heart rate's going to go. The quicker you go, the quicker the heart rate will go. You can slow the heart rate down as well. So don't forget, we're talking about mental health. So sometimes, slowing down as well, it's very important. It gets the parasympathetic nervous system into the mix as well and calms the system down. And so these are some ideas that you can work with.
Yeah, and sort of following on from that, the power of sleep, which taps into the parasympathetic system, and it taps into this, the dream system. And being a psychoanalyst, we love dreams. We love to interpret dreams and all of that unconscious stuff, because subhanallah, the unconscious is bigger than the conscious, and that's the biggest driving force for other human beings, actually our unconscious. And that's driven by the parasympathetic, and the parasympathetic is a very healing system. So sleep is very healing for mental health. Dream is very healing for mental health. And if you're really interested about the unconscious, analyze the dreams that you have, and it'll give you a lot of answers.
I just wanted to add, if you don't mind, also on that point, Sister Soraiya came up with some really good tactics on sleep, and it was difficult for me to up that. There were so many good tips there, but one just on movement. There is a lot of suggestions now not to exercise in those late periods of night, and we have this culture, well, it's gone now, but we have this culture of the 24-hour gyms, and getting to exercise and boost that adrenaline, cortisol as you're trying to get to sleep at night may not be the most wisest thing to do. We want to settle down at that period. We want to decrease the temperature of our body and get used to that nice, gentle movement into sleep. And as Dr. Hakim said there, that it's really, really important to get some good restorative sleep and get up with energy. And I'm telling you, personally, I'm going to be vulnerable here. I struggle with getting up in the morning, feel really tired, and my energy is low. But with a few simple changes, I have noticed that I've seen a big increase in my feeling of energy when I wake up, not drained, but just feeling a bit more energetic and lively. And daily movement is one of those. If I haven't exercised that day, definitely can see the result kind of the next day. I just feel a lot.
And an interesting thing you should do, Zainali, is actually to have a dream journal next to you. So the moment you wake up, and you remember your dream, just write it down, because you'll forget it, you know, within 5 minutes. If you know, sometimes we get dreams just before we wake up, and that's ideal. You just sit there and write it down and forget about it. And then sometimes when you're feeling a bit bored, or you think, you know, I've got nothing else to do, you take out your, I've got it here somewhere. Yeah, here it is. Here it is. You know, I've got my book here, right? And then you read through it, and then you read about a dream that you wrote about 5 years ago, and you think, do you know what? This happened to me last week. And do you know what? This thing, and it's amazing. I don't know what it is, but then, you know, I'm biased because I'm a psychoanalyst, isn't it? Oh dear, full of biases.
Oh, that's interesting. I might try that.
Yeah, this is my brown book.
Got a specific question for any recommendations?
Actually, it says there, look, Al-Kafil. I got this book from Al-Atib al-Abbasiyya. So it's a special book for me.
Yes, a specific question about exercises for someone with fibromyalgia, if you know any.
Oh yeah, this it's a specific area. It's got lots of different aspects to it. We've got to try and create some balance. I think the best advice I can give with someone suffering from fibromyalgia is just looking at balance. You're not overdoing something, you're in control. You're not overdoing something, you're not underdoing something. So less exercise than you feel, and you don't feel that energy and balance. That's not going to be good enough. You've got to up it a little bit more. And obviously, if you're doing too much, you could go into pain and discomfort as well, and that could also have an effect. In terms of specific exercises, again, there isn't really. You've got to have fun. And it's really important that you enjoy movement, especially if you've got fibromyalgia. We've got to be looking at something that's fun, something you've always wanted to do. Sometimes I'm talking to some patients, and they're like, I've always wanted to try, I don't know, yoga. I've always wanted to try a particular position that I've seen all the time on Facebook, for example, right? It's getting up to those positions. You can find on YouTube loads of cool things that can beginner steps to get to that place. Have fun with it, enjoy it. That's really important. But most importantly, find a balance with your exercises. I don't recommend any specifics, but what I have seen as being beneficial is a little bit of cardio. So a lot of heart pumping exercises seem to help. And of course, lots of flexibility, which is slow and calming as well. So those slow stretching type of movements can be really beneficial. I think hopefully that answers the question, but it is a very broad topic, and there's lots of things, including nutrition that has an influence, obviously mindset, mental health we're talking about today, and sleep has a huge impact. Relationships has a huge impact, your spiritual connection. So it's a very all-encompassing strategy that we have to take. But if you just do small bits of each, just small bits, don't overwhelm it. Just touch 5-minute wins. You'll keep winning, as Dr. Hakim said, just keep winning. You'll end up noticing some really nice changes, inshallah.
Losing's fine as well. You know, I mean, it's okay to lose as well. It's part and parcel of the whole journey.
Say that one more time. I missed that.
Losing as well. You got to lose.
Well. Yeah, losing's fine.
It makes.
It's got another question about traumas. So traumas are challenging to work through. How do you start off the process, especially when the victim holds stigma towards managing mental health illnesses and their interventions?
Yeah, you need to challenge that. You know, why does the victim hold stigma towards managing it? I mean, for there to be long-term solution or long-term betterment, you need to get all the stakeholders involved. And unless the family are involved, and how can I say it? You know, you're either in the wrong environment, or you're in an environment that's not understanding. So you need to get everyone on board for there to be long-lasting change. You know, I mean, eventually people do change, and people do accept that, you know, they've been in the wrong. But yeah, I think family therapy is necessary. It's messy, but yeah, it is necessary. You know, you need to challenge these stigmas. You need to challenge these stories that are turning them into stigmas. So there's a lot of hard work there to be done.
There's a long process.
And you know, we shouldn't shy away from hard work. You know, everyone in the community is working hard to, you know, to get to where they are, and you shouldn't shy away from your own hard work when it comes to mental and spiritual work.
So it's prioritizing yourself in that sense above other things sometimes, and making sure you put the effort.
You always have to come first, but after you've come first, then you've got to go out there and do the second difficult thing is explain yourself and understand where the other person's coming from, because you've got to understand where they're coming from and why they're perpetuating, you know, the stigma and even the trauma. So you've got to make yourself stronger, and then go out there and confront the dragon. So you have your own internal dragon, which you have to slay, and then you've got to slay the outside dragon as well.
There's just another question that popped up on the screen there, talking about the tragedies that we commemorate, and for the length of period that we commemorate them for, whether that might have a direct relationship on our mental health challenges.
No, I mean, we can flip that into something that's motivating, something that's positive, something that inspires us, something that gives us mental fortitude, mental resilience, you know, all of the positive stuff. So, you know, it is about working through your particular story and mythology and how that affects you. And I think, you know, everything has two sides to the coin. So you need to decide which one you're going to use and how you're going to use it and how is it going to affect you. And I think that, you know, inshallah, for our youth as they're coming up, you know, they can pick up on this thing and then apply it to themselves, and at the same time educate us, you know, me as an old biddy, you know, I need to know what's going on amongst the shabab and you know, learn and adapt and know what the current world is about. And that's what that's what us old biddies have to do. You know, we need to know what the current situation is and what the current shabab are doing and, you know, how they're thinking, and I have to keep adapting, because the moment you stop adapting and, you know, stop changing that narrative, you know, you do get it stuck in a rut and you're left with these expectations which are far from reality.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, it depends on how you take things in a way and how you kind of decide to.
You know, I mean, it's a bit like Marmite. I don't like Marmite. You know, probably you know, my brother does like Marmite, but I'm not going to judge him for that.
No.
I'm more of a peanut butter fan.
Yeah, I mean, some people just hate peanut butter. You know, I just had a peanut butter sandwich and it was absolutely lovely. It's not good for my my physical health for sure. And some people say no, you know, it's got saturated fats, it's got vegetable oil, it's got sugar, it's going to give you cancer. Do you know what I mean? And I'm thinking, no, it's just peanut butter. You know, so, you know, these stories can be very powerful, can be very negative, but at the same time, they can be very, very powerful and positive and reduce your mental and physical pain. Yeah,
absolutely. I think there's quite a lot of interest in the questions in terms of sleep now as well. So there's a couple of questions. So first is there an effect of exercise use on insomnia? And secondly is the one I popped up on screen. I've noticed in my patients a huge increase in insomnia and sleep problems. Why do you think this is, and how can we regulate our body clock better?
Well, you know, I mean, if we look at society before in terms of sleep, they never used to sleep 8 hours. You know, they used to sleep for 3 or 4 hours, wake up, have a little snack, have a chat, have some chai, you know, have you know, a bit of whatever, and then go back to sleep and then wake up for Fajr. So, you know, this whole notion that we have to have 8 hours sleep, I think that's not a good notion. And then we sort of need to go away from it has to be like this, and if it's not like this, you have a problem, and the problem becomes the problem. Whereas it's understandable when you don't have sleep. You know, some people don't have jobs. Some people have problems with their relationships. Some people have, it's a pandemic. People have lots on their, you know, on their mind. You know, all the uncertainty. So it's normal for you to lose sleep, and it's not an issue as long as you don't give them Stilnox and Xanax, and you know, don't give them those drugs, please. You know, it doesn't help things. You just become addicted to it, and getting them off it is actually a big problem. So,
yeah, I mean,
you know, the problem becomes the problem. Don't let it be the problem. It's just natural. If you're really tired, you'll really sleep. If you're, you know, if you're having a bad day, you won't sleep. You know, you're a medic. I'm a medic. You know, I went 100 hours without any sleep. You know, and I kind of survived that. So, yeah, it's not such a major issue. Sorry. just blew up the whole issue of insomnia.
The exercise piece on insomnia is mainly around the fact that, you know, you fatigue, you create a little bit of worn down feeling, you feel tired, you feel like you've worked hard, and you've done a bit of those kind of HIIT classes, if you like, or HIIT training, something that's pumped you up and got you moving throughout the day or through the day, and that obviously sets you in the right mood to begin to calm down, low down, creates a better mix between this whole cortisol and melatonin that's supposed to be fluctuating, or at least go down and up in the nighttime. And it's really important just getting that movement, and getting fast movement and quick movements can be quite nice for that. In terms of this question, which is on there, something which is maybe outside of movement a little bit, it comes to light. Light is huge when it comes to sleep. So if you're always moving from the house into a car, into your office, or nowadays just into the house, and there isn't any stepping outside for some bright light, and in the winterish months you get straight into the dark as soon as you finish your work, you're going to be messing around with that circadian rhythm, that clock in your body, that normalized, or that normally looks at or understands from the light what time it is, and it's time to go to bed when it gets dark, and it's time to wake up when there's light. So one advice I give to a lot of people is just step outside in the morning time and get some of that light. If you've got to walk to work, it's great. You know, alhamdulillah, I've got opportunities to walk to work, so my eyes get some light in the morning. If you don't, if you've got a garden, if you've got a window, just open that up, take some fresh air and get some of the light in if you can. In these cold months, maybe put a scarf and like a hat and everything as well before you freeze.
And, you know, get rid of this stuff as well.
Yeah, get rid of that. Get rid of
that. You know,
yeah,
not the Google, but you know, just get rid of it.
Yeah, so these are some tips. But I actually agree here with Dr. Hakim that sometimes if you really focus on it, if you focus it as it being a problem, then it becomes a problem from an insomnia perspective. So, you know, if you can't sleep, sometimes it's okay to just get up, do something different, and then go back into bed again, instead of lying there and looking at the ceiling, still wondering why you're not asleep. So, you know, get up, do something, and then go back again. You know, switch the mind off a little bit when you do that activity. That can be useful.
Yeah, I've started learning French now. While you know, when I can't get to sleep.
Oh, that's in your dreams now, right? Your dream gen. There's some French in there as well.
You got me there, mate.
You'll start dreaming in French next.
Yeah, well, I don't mind actually.
Yeah, but right. The question's right. That insomnia is seem to be, or sleep problems seem to be on a pandemic of their own, if you like. So, you know, I think it's an important topic to address.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're just going to finish with a nice question for Zainali. Just one exercise that you can demonstrate to us that we can all do at home easily, as an example of a quick win. So I know you both speakers spoke about these quick wins. So what can we do at home?
Yeah. One of the quick wins, you can still hear me, but hopefully you can. One of the quick wins is regarding this area, your upper back, your thoracic spine. We vary a community of bent backs. You know, we're always in this position. If I ask you the question right now, how many times do you put your hands above your head in the day? most likely is to get a mug from the top of the cupboard for a cup of tea. So one of the quick wins we can do for our spine is to think about creating movement in 3 different directions, because we're 3D. So for example, you can just take your hands up nice and tall, going up all the way back, and then just leaning down again. So that's your forward and back motion. That's your forward and back. Then you've got your side to side, so I'm going to face this way for that. Hands above your head, so we're always thinking about hands above your head. And literally, I mean, it's so simple, quick win. Really get through that motion. Get through that motion, that's your side to side. And obviously your rotation ones are in rotation, either side. So it creates a nice structural movement throughout the body. Now, if you wanted to adapt these to make them a little bit more faster for some heart rate, from cardiovascular fitness, all you have to do is do them quicker. So the quicker you do them, the more your heart's going to go. Or if you want, you can change it to a few punches in different directions. You can go up and down, a few punches. That gets the cardiovascular system working. Side to side, same thing. So now you've got your cardiovascular fitness. And if you want a bit of load, a bit of strength, you can add a bit of weight into it. So bottles of water is a great example of this. If you've got some weight, tin of beans, I know that's so heavy, maybe something a bit heavy. A saucepan, right? This is a great one, right? Make sure you hold the saucepan, put loads of water in it, and you just go in rotations. You get loads of your abdominal muscles working. Your body is really functioning well. So before you boil your chai, at 2 a.m. in the morning, according to 2 a.m. in the morning, make sure that you boil the chai. Well, before you boil it, before you put it in the kettle, pour it in a saucepan. And you got 5 of these, and then you pour it in the kettle and use it, and then you got your cup of tea. Hopefully that's helpful, gives you some tips. But that's my quick win. 3D movement is really important.
Mr. Wick has got some competition, mate.
So I didn't even hear that. I didn't even hear that. Honestly, I didn't hear that. It was on mute or something.
Mr. Wick has got competition.
I think I'd have to be very careful about not flooding the kitchen if I used a saucepan with water in it to go backwards and forwards. But thank you for that.
2 a.m., particularly at 2 a.m.
Thank you so much for that. For doing that. So I think that's all we've got time for today, unfortunately. But I just wanted to say thank you to all of the audience. I know it's virtual, but thank you everyone for joining us today, for the people asking the questions. A particular thank you to our speakers for giving us, a wealth of knowledge about emotional well-being, mental health, movement, exercise, and inshallah we can use the advice and the information that that you both have given to us, and Sister Soraiya as well with her fantastic talk, and we can use the advice to help ourselves and our loved ones, especially during these challenging times. So thank you to you both once again.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for listening. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.